Jake Kelfer, welcome to the podcast, man. I'm fired up to have you here.
Let's go, brother. Happy to be here.
Absolutely. So, Jake, to kick this off, can you give the audience kind of an idea of like what was life like for little Jake as you were growing up? Kind of fill us in.
Oh man, little Jake was a crazy man. The dude was running around like nuts. Jake, like growing up myself, there were a few things that were really important to me. All right, family, academics, and athletics. I'm very, very blessed to have two incredible parents who have shown me what it's like to be a man, to treat a woman, to treat people with respect, to be a family person. I have a younger brother who's awesome. I played sports since I was 5 years old. My dad never missed a single game from 5 years old till my last high school varsity basketball game. Like amazing. And then academics was also really important to me because as a 5'8" Jewish kid from the suburbs, playing in the NBA, which was my dream, that wasn't, likely to happen. So I really focused on my academics, which allowed me to get into the college that I wanted to go to. So growing up, I was always focused on this internal motivation to be the best, to overcome this underdog mentality, especially in athletics, being the smallest guy on the court my whole life, but always playing years above my age group. So, growing up for me, it was always about how can I be the best that I can be and really just do whatever I could to have fun and separate myself from the crowd.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's so true too. Like the underdog, like it brings something out of you sometimes where people are like, nah, like you're 5'8", and you're like, watch me do this.
For sure.
Yeah, it brings a fire out of you. So I love to see that. And so then like as you get to, let's say, end of high school, you're like crushing it, varsity basketball. As far as going into college, did you have an idea of like, I'm going to go play basketball there, or that's out of the cards, or kind of where was your head in that process?
So I'm in high school, and by the time I reached my senior year, I realized like I'm probably not going to D1, right? I could have probably played D2, D3, but in reality, I realized like, okay, what do I really want to do? If I'm not going to make it to the NBA, then why don't we focus on representing NBA players? So I went to college. I went to the University of Southern California with the intention to become a sports agent, because I was like, if I can't play for the Lakers, well, I'm going to represent the Lakers players, right? I was like, that's how I'll be on the court. And so I spent all of my college experience really like networking, joining clubs, organizations. I was in a fraternity. I was involved with the Sports Business Association. I would do the networking events. I would do like the mock interviews, the resume workshops, literally anything that I could do to like advance myself and put myself in a position to succeed. Well, literally right before I graduate college, the agency that I'd wanted to work for, and I had been interning them for 6 months at the time, they tell me that they're going on a hiring freeze and they can't bring me on. And so I'm like, no way. I'm about to graduate hundreds of thousands of dollars in student loan debt from USC. And I'm like, what the hell? Like this was the path. Go to college, get a job, be an agent, get really successful, make a lot of money, buy an island, marry, have kids, that was the path, right? Yeah. And that was how I was programmed to think. And that's kind of started when a lot of shift started happening in my life, because I was like, okay, that plan, I need a different angle, because everything was going good up to that point. But then they said that, and I didn't have a job and I was graduating in a couple months. So I was like, well, what am I going to do now? So I put everything that I learned into practice. I made an entire list of people I wanted to connect with, places I wanted to work with, people I could reach out to, people I'd already known. And I started connecting dots. Well, one thing led to the next.
Love that.
And right when I graduated, I ended up getting a job to not just play for the Lakers, but to be a corporate partnerships assistant for the Los Angeles Lakers. So my first job out of college, in the crazy way that life works, went from playing for the Lakers as the dream to now being on the court, picking all the contestants during Kobe Bryant's final NBA season. I mean, are you kidding me? Like
crazy.
What a dream. And that's started everything else, which led to the rest of this journey.
Yeah. And I think it's so cool too that like, I think sometimes a lot of people go, NBA is my dream. Like what a beautiful way to say, maybe it's not my dream, or it is my dream and I may not get to the NBA, but it's like, how can I still be involved in that? Right. And it's like such a beautiful way to still keep that in your life, like keep that fire in your heart.
Yeah. And I think you bring up such a great point, because a lot of times, you may have a dream. And in fact, for me, my dream was to play in the NBA. But what I realized along the way was more important than the dream of playing in the NBA. It was, what can I learn in the process of pursuing something I desperately seek? Because the lessons I learned in that attempt to achieve greatness taught me more about my life than I could have ever imagined. My ability to work hard, discipline, teamwork, leadership. Those lessons have now paid incredible dividends as an entrepreneur, as a businessman, as an author, as a speaker. And what I think is really important sometimes is that we're so fixated on the end result, that desirable outcome, that we lose sight of what the wins are in the pursuit of that. And, when we talk about finding direction, right, we got to think about like, we can have a direction, but we need to know what steps to take, because the end result might be a different place than we initially set out to achieve. And that's been a huge lesson for me to learn on this journey, is that the end result, you may get there, you may not get there.
Yeah.
Oftentimes when you do get there, you just pick another end result. Right.
Always.
And then we could talk about all this chasing, but in reality, with the pursuit of greatness is where you're going to learn, where you're going to grow, and where you're going to live. That's the experiences and the knowledge that's going to be able to set you apart from everybody else who's just as confused as you are, or who's just as ambitious as you are.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting too, like, it's like life's a process of continuously finding your direction, right? And it's like, just like that, it's like sometimes you go into your life, you pursue something, you're going for it, maybe you get to it, maybe not, but it's like sometimes you get into this place, I think, as you find direction, that if you're doing something and you don't like it, you get in this place of like, well, I've invested so much time and so much money and so much energy that if I leave, like, was it all just a waste of time? But the reality, just like you were saying, is it's like you got a skill set. Like you got something that you can use to get to this next level, to get to this next journey in your life, and it's going to help you get there faster. It's like the cliche saying of, it's like, you don't get to a goal to get to the goal, you get to it because of who you become in the process.
Yeah. And I love that, man. It's so good.
Yeah. So like, let's say then eventually you realize all your plans kind of fall apart. And I think one other beautiful thing like in this part is, it's like sometimes they say people graduate from school and they stop learning. And I think one of the beautiful things you did even while you were in school, and people should take this as a lesson, whether you're still in school or whether you're out of school, is it's like, don't ever let your education stop.
Yeah.
Right. Just because you're in school doesn't mean you can't keep growing your education. And it's like when you were in school, it sounds like you were avid. You were like, I'm going to learn this. I'm going to do that resume thing. I'm going to study this. Like, you did everything you possibly could so that when the moment came for you to go into the quote unquote real world, you were like, I got this tool belt of like a ridiculous amount of skills. And even when your plan was like shitting on you, it's like, nope, that's not actually going to happen. The plan you had, the agency, you had all these tools, and that allowed you to still take this next step. So I'm curious, like, you kind of casually mentioned, okay, so I graduate and I work for the Lakers. So like, walk us through how does that actually happen? Like, how do you go from, you want to work for an agency, all of a sudden now you're basically on the court with Kobe Bryant.
Yeah. No, great. So here's how it happened. And I'll be very, very practical here. I made a list of every single NBA team because in my mind, I still wanted to be an agent. Okay. This is really important. Just because the initial path to being an agent wasn't going to happen. Be an agent, work at an agency, then become an agent. Now I had to figure out, well, how can I navigate? And this is part of the whole journey of my career. Is I was like, well, what do I need to do then to set myself up to be an agent? I'd interned at agencies. I'd worked the events. I'd worked the high school tournaments. I had done all these things, but I knew that agents are connected with all the teams. So I was like, okay, well, let me make a list of every NBA team that I'd want to work with in order from 1 to 30.
Yeah.
Lakers. I'm a diehard Laker fan. I grew up in Los Angeles. Like we have a room in my parents' house. It's called the Lakers room. All right. It's painted purple and gold. Nice. There's memorabilia, man. Like I grew up with a cardboard cutout of Kobe watching me play video games. Like we're huge fans. So I was like, okay, Lakers are number one and they're in LA. So I don't have to fly out of the state or whatever.
Right.
So I start reaching out and I realized that one of the guys who I'd invited to speak at a sports business meeting, he was the executive director of corporate partnerships. So I connected with him. I found out there was another person from USC in the corporate partnerships division. So I was like, okay, well, what division excites me? There's the basketball side of things. There's the business side of things. I was like, well, corporate partnerships kind of is in the intersection between both. And that could be the easiest avenue, at least for now, because I know somebody there. So I reach out and I just go to set up a pure conversational chat. Wasn't going to ask for anything because I didn't even think they had jobs available. Like it's the Lakers, right? And I'm chatting with this girl and she tells me, oh, we're going to be looking for 3 assistants for the start of the season. Like, is this something you've ever thought of? And I'm like, now that you mention it, I would love to be considered, right? So I'm like, well, what do I need to do? So I'm on this just networking call and all of a sudden she's telling me there might be an opportunity to interview. So I said, what do I need to do? And she tells me some things to do. So I'm like, done. You got it.
Yeah.
Of course, I do everything that she says to the best of my ability. And then a few weeks later, the interview process starts and I end up getting that job. So the way I got that was literally, I said, who do I want to work for? Where do I want to be? And what's going to help me get closer to my goal? Because I was like, if I work for the Lakers, I put that on the resume. That's amazing. It's going to be Kobe's final season, which means there's going to be a lot of opportunities. And number 3, depending on what I do as my responsibility, I can meet a lot of people who go to the Laker games. I can meet my agents and contacts, and I can kind of, see what deals I could produce. So I ended up doing that. And part of my job for the Lakers was I was a corporate partnerships assistant, meaning on game days, I picked all the contestants. So half court shot, skills challenge.
No way.
Yeah. So I got to do all that.
That's epic.
Now, this is where it starts to get interesting because here I am, I'm doing this. I'm loving it. I'm realizing that people is just like, that's what I'm good at is people.
Yeah.
So there's one day though, that I'm going down here. All right. And this is how we're talking about the evolution of what happens in your journey when you least expect it. So now I'm going down to the elevator to pick a contestant. All right. Now this contestant was going to meet me down and they were shooting for 95,000 or something. If they make it 95K, the crowd's going to go nuts. So I'm pumped about this, right? I get in the elevator and it's just me and the attendant. All right. It's just me and the attendant. We're just sitting in the elevator. And I'm like, all right, cool. Look, what's up, bro? He goes, how you doing? I'm like, good. Event level, please. Well, right as the doors close, a hand walks in, a hand opens and the doors open up. And I'm like, uh-oh, who's coming in right now? Like, I got to get down. And it's Jerry West. Now, I'm starting to panic because Jerry West is the NBA logo. I mean, he is the guy. He is a living legend. Yeah. And so now I'm a 22-year-old assistant. My heart's just pumping out of my chest. I'm sweating. I mean, I have pictures of him in the house I grew up in, right? So it's me, Jerry, and the elevator attendant. And the person working the elevator, he looks at Jerry and he goes, excuse me. He has no idea who he is. He goes, what floor would you like to go to? Jerry says, the event level. I mean, he's got courtside seats, right? Like he's Jerry West.
Yeah.
And the person working the elevator looks back at him and says, well, do you have a credential? Because if not, I'm going to have to ask you to step off because this young man pointing at me now has work to do. And I'm like, oh no, he did it. like, no way. Jerry looks at him and he's like, no, I don't have a credential, but do you know who I am? And I'm like, oh my God. The person working the elevator says, no, sir, I don't, but I need you to step off. Now, this is one of those moments where at the time you don't think anything of it, but now looking back, this is a game-changing moment.
Yeah.
Jerry's about to walk off the elevator and I go, wait, he's my guest. I'll escort him down. And the person working the elevator is kind of looking at me like, dude, why haven't you said hi to him if he's your guest? You know what I mean? Like, why are you in awkward silence all the time? And so he says, are you sure? Because he's not going to question me. Like I got the credential. And so I look at Jerry and I kind of like, what do you think? And he's like, yeah. And so I look back and I'm like, yeah. The next 14 seconds, dude. I mean, greatest elevator ride ever. But here's where it gets exciting. I start to panic because I'm wondering like, oh my God, Jerry's going to be so mad right now. He's going to be pissed at the person didn't know who he was. He's going to be pissed at me for trying to stand up for him and like escort him down. Like, I don't know what's about to happen. Right as we're about to go our separate ways, he sticks out his hand. He shakes my hand. He says, thank you. I appreciate what you just did for me. And it was in that moment where I was like, holy smokes. Like Jerry West, the NBA logo, just told me a bottom of the totem pole employee that he appreciates me for taking him down the elevator.
Yeah.
It was in that moment that I realized the power of one interaction, the power that one person can have over somebody in our life. And it made me think about this, that we all want the same thing in our life. We want to be loved. We want to be heard. We want to feel that we matter. We want to belong. We want to feel valued. And Jerry West in that moment gave me that feeling. Doesn't matter that he's the NBA logo Hall of Fame player and I'm in student loan debt trying to figure out what the heck is going on in my life. But that continued to start me on how do I give people more opportunities? I've now turned this into how do I create the feeling of elevation in others? How do I elevate people in every interaction that I have? Well, a few weeks go by and I keep starting to think about this.
Yeah.
And one thing leads to the next. And that's what started the next phase of my journey of, okay, well, what other ideas are out there? Led me to a book, led me to starting this basketball event. But all of these things come from experiences when you take a chance, when you put yourself out there, when you see an opportunity and you go for it, regardless of what the outcome could be. And that's what it's all about when it comes to like figuring out how do we move forward? How do we take that next step to continue to advance and grow in this pursuit of greatness?
Love that. That is the most ridiculous story ever. Jerry West, he's like, he's my guest. That's Ridiculous. I hope you've like, have you ever reconnected with him after that? And been
I
like,
haven't, but like someday he's going to hear one of these interviews and he's going to be like,
yeah,
oh, dude, I remember that kid.
yeah, that is the most ridiculous thing ever. So if my research is correct, you did this for about 2 years, right? That you were with the Lakers?
I did 1 year, 1 season with the team.
1 season. And so kind of walk us through what happened. You do this season. It sounds like it was an awesome time. Like, kind of where do you go from there? You're working with the Lakers. You're working with literally like the dream team that you want to work with.
Yep.
And when do things kind of start to shift into the next evolution?
So shortly after working with Jerry, or excuse me, that experience with Jerry,
Yeah.
I start to see like, I'm just electrified at like this feeling, right? Like I'm like, how do I give this feeling to more people? So I come home and I ask myself, what do I know and how can I help? I was like, what do I know? What knowledge do I already possess? And how can I use that knowledge to help somebody? It's the name of the game when you're trying to create something. At the time, I didn't realize that these questions, though, were going to lead to what it did. And I was like, oh, I know all about getting your dream internship, getting a job out of college, interviewing, resumes, networking. Those were things I was really good at for someone my age. So I'm like, you know what? I have a younger brother. I have fraternity brothers. And guess what? They need a lot of help. And I was like, if I could give them something that would help them get better jobs and internships in less amount of time so they could party more and have a better college experience, then I'm a winner. So I started writing all these blog posts. I realized I got like 30, 40 pages of content. And I like say, here you guys go, like, take a look at this. And no one reads it. They're like, dude, we don't want to read this. And I'm like, damn it. Like, are you kidding me?
This
so
is
now
gold.
I'm like, okay. Yeah. So I'm like, come on. So I'm still working with the Lakers, but I'm doing this on the side, kind of trying to figure out what I'm going to do. And I end up talking with a mentor of mine. Now, this is a mentor of mine who's a professor at UCLA. And I'm like, hey, can you take a look at my content? And he looks at it and he goes, dude, this is really good stuff. And I was like, no, like, thanks, man. Like, appreciate that. And he goes, but here's what I want you to do. And I'm like, what's up? He goes, I want you to make this a book. It's like, what are you talking about? He's like, I want you to make this into a book, like a real book. And I'm like, wait, you want me, 23 years old at the time, to write a real book on career development, and I'm less than a year removed from college? And he goes, yeah, the knowledge you have for this book is good. I think my students would benefit from it. So I was like, I'm writing a book.
Yeah.
Dude, I didn't know how to write a book. I didn't know any of this shit, right? I'm just over here trying to make things happen. But I was like, okay. He said, write a book. That's pretty cool to have a book as my business card. That could help me stand out with agencies and elevate my status, right? Because I'm thinking like, I'll work for the Lakers and then I'll keep going back to this agent line. So I start writing this book. I leave at 5 a.m. I get to the Lakers office so I can avoid traffic. I type in my car every morning and then I go into the Lakers office. I work all day and I come home and I type or I rest or whatever. But now I got to figure out like, okay, well, when am I going to release this book? How am I going to do this whole thing? And I decide, I'm like, well, the Lakers aren't making the playoffs. Kobe's retiring at the end of the month. I'm going to retire at the end of the month. And the book's going to launch on the first of the next month. So that's how I decided on the first launch day, dude. Like, I didn't know what I was doing. I was like, well, how do I pick the color of the book? I was like, I like the Lakers. I like the Trojans. And then I have a friend who passed away several years before. And I was like, this one's for him. So the color became green. And if you see it, the green behind me, like, I still use that color and it's all because of him. So like, I was like, green, boom, that's it. And then I was like, in my mind, I was like, Jake, like, we don't just do things half-assed. Like, we got to go big or go home. So I was like, I'm not just going to write a book. I'm going to write a best-selling book. So I started Googling. I asked my best friends, Mr. and Mrs. Google. I say, hey, how do I write a best-selling book? And they give me all these answers. I'm like, this is amazing. So I started figuring it out. And then May 1st, I leave the Lakers and I launch this book. All right. And immediately what happens is this book becomes an Amazon bestseller in multiple categories. And I'm like, holy smokes. And then people were like, well, what are you going to do now? And I'm like, well, I still want to be an agent. And they were like, well, what about this book? Like, you have an Amazon bestselling book. Like, what are you going to do with it? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I'll keep doing it. And they're like, don't you want to spread this message? And I was like, yeah. And they're like, did you know you can get paid to talk? And I was like, wait, what? Like, you can make money speaking to other people? Like, I always thought like it was just what you did when you were really successful. Yeah. I didn't realize that I could do it now. And they're like, yeah. So I start speaking. I start reaching out to every single college, community college in in California, all 113 at the time. And I was like, hey, I just wrote this book. I am a great speaker. I would love to talk. Like, I was just saying whatever. And I went from A to Z. And somehow I got a bite at A. It was like the first group of colleges, I got a bite and they were like, let's do it. And I got my first gig and I'm like, let's go. And they're like, have you ever done like this big, like we're going to need 6 presentations in one day and 6 the next day. Can you do that? And I'm like, 12 presentations in 2 days. Like, that's a lot, but hell yeah, I can do that. I could totally do that. No problem. It's my bread and butter. I end up going, I'm like, oh my God, this was the hardest thing I've ever done. Right. I got 3 people in the crowd, 5 people in the crowd. Cause there's all these different workshops. Instead of doing like one big one, they were doing a bunch of different ones.
Oh yeah.
But what I learned from that was so much about this idea that like, look, life's never going to happen in the perfect way. We're not always going to have the answers that are right in front of us. But what we do have is our ability to say, let's go for it. Our ability to say, you know what? It might not have gone this way. Let's pivot and change this way. And that led me to the next pivot of, well, I don't want to just be a bottom of the totem pole employee at an agency. I want to do something that's going to change the game. And that's when I decided to create a secondary NBA draft combine where I'd be able to have players come. I'd be able to meet players. I'd be able to build relationships with all the teams, and I'd be able to have agents become customers. So now I'd get to actually negotiate with them rather than be an assistant getting their coffee. And that was the next phase that led to us helping over 70 guys sign their first contract in 30 countries.
Crazy. Yeah. I think one of the most beautiful parts of hearing your story there is like your willingness to take action, and not just a little action. Like it's like, I don't know if there's probably not a lot of people that say you should write a book, but there's probably a decent amount of people that say to someone like, you should write a book. And the amount of people that probably go write that book is probably like 0.0001%.
For sure.
Right? It's like nobody does it. And it's like, how many times in your life do you get a decent piece of advice or a good piece of advice, and you're never actually going to know where that takes you in your life if you do something about it? And then to the speaking thing, and you go, I'm just going to email everybody and see where it goes. It's like when you take massive action in your life, something is going to happen. Right. And then when that something happens, you get clarity on, do I want to do more? Do I want to do less? But I think so many people get into this place of like sitting and waiting of like, what do I want to do? And do I want to do this? Well, I could try that, but I don't know if I'm going to like it. It's like, well, unless you do the thing, like you're never really going to know. And even if is someone saying you're going to do 12 speeches in 2 days and maybe you haven't done a ton of speaking or something like that, it's like, say yes and figure it out. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Like we're so afraid in our society. We're so afraid of like failing. We're so afraid. And it's not that we're afraid of failing. We're afraid of what people will think if we fail or if we don't succeed at the level we want to, right? We're afraid that then that'll lead to us being rejected or people seeing us as not good enough. And then we will just go down our own spiral. But all that is projected. Most of that is never reality, right? Yeah. Because if you look at everybody that we've ever studied in entrepreneurship or life or business, every single person has messed up more times than they can remember. But because they keep going and trying new things, eventually something hits, right? And so what I've taken from all of this too, and I love the action piece, but it's evolved into something that we use in our life that we really talk with our clients and with people that I speak with, is what we call the ACE method. Now, the ACE method is a 3-part process. And this is like super tangible that we could apply right away. But it stands for action, connection, and enjoyment. All right. And the first part of this is action. If you want something to happen, you have to take action. You can't just manifest and it comes to you. You have to take action in a direction that is towards things that you want to achieve. Now, that path may go left, it may go right, it may go backwards, it may go forwards. But when you're clear on what success looks like to yourself as an individual, and you know what brings you joy and the things that bring you joy, and you do more of that, you're going to be able to start taking action. So the question that you ask yourself is, what action do I need to take to get closer to my definition of success? That starts to build momentum. Action leads to momentum. Momentum leads to results. Results lead to opportunities to adjust, reflect, review, and continue. But then you have the second part of the piece, which is connection. You could take action, but if you're connecting with the wrong people, that action becomes pointless. What you need to do is be very intentional on who you're connecting with. So when I was reaching out to all these community colleges, it was not intentional. I didn't know what I was doing. I was just reaching out to anybody and anybody. And I realized that the more intentional I became, the more specific I became in knowing who I wanted to connect with them, the best ways they like to be communicated with, then I was able to build better relationships faster. Those relationships lead to different types of referrals, recommendations. So the second part is connection. You will never have a successful business or a successful life without connection. It's the number one indicator to long-term happiness. It's the number one thing that builds business. You can't have a business without a customer. You can't have a romantic relationship without a person. You need people, no matter how much digital stuff we have going on. Connection is the fundamental element that lifts us up. And then the last part of this is something that my mom has really worked on with me because I'm ambitious, man. I want to go. Yeah. But that E is for enjoyment, man. You got to have fun in the pursuit of greatness. You got to say, well, how can I make this fun? Because the truth is, not everything we do, not every action, not every connection request, that's not always fun. It's part of our life, right? Not everything is going to be fun, but how can we find enjoyment in the pursuit of greatness? And when you can find enjoyment in the pursuit of greatness, you can start to really be more present, be more grateful, see opportunities as they are, see its situations as they exist. And then you're able to really say, okay, this is the right path. So when you combine action, connection, enjoyment, my man, now you got a winning business in life. And that's special.
For real. It's the golden formula, man. And just nugget after nugget. I love it, Jake. So let me ask you this then. So now you're writing your book, you're speaking on stages, you're like really starting to lift off here. At what point, and kind of walk us through, how does the inception and the idea of I'm going to create this combine, it's going to be this thing, because it seems like you're almost going in this direction of like, I'm going to help college kids and go in this. Yeah. And it's like, wait, but I still love the NBA and I want to do, so like, where does that come in?
Yeah. So I got the first book out. I'm starting to try to speak, right? Like, cause I quit the job with the Lakers. So your boy's got to find money. You know, we hustle. Like it's a true hustle. I moved into my first apartment. I was like, let's go. Like, we're going to make this work. We're all in. So I'm emailing anybody, but I'm still networking with all the agents, right? I'm still building this up. And I realized that there was not a secondary event. Now, a secondary event for prospects that needed more exposure. Now, I won't go into all the specifics around like the NBA and all these things, but there was a need. They were just announcing some new opportunities and nobody was taking advantage of it. So I was talking with a couple agents and they're like, this could be a really great idea. I was like, I'm doing it. Screw it. I'm doing it. If it doesn't work, my career in basketball like ends before it starts. But if it does work, I have a chance to change the NBA draft process. I have a chance to change lives. And my whole purpose is to elevate people to achieve their true potential and definition of success. So I was like, let's go. So I make this decision. All right. I released my book in May. I'm working for half a year, starting to speak. I'm building up some momentum. January comes. I'm like, all right, we're doing this combine. The combine is May because that's the date it has to be. The draft is set every year. So I had 5 months to put on this entire event. I make a deposit at the venue and I'm like, what am I doing? Like this is crazy, you know? I make a deposit at this. I have people in the corner, but now I'm like, well, how am I going to get customers for this thing? So now I'm picking up the phone. I'm calling every single agent on the phone, every single agent that I could find, right? I do the same thing with the Lakers, with the community colleges, with the agents. I make a list of every single agent that exists in the directory. Right? It all comes down to being intentional with who you connect with and at the right time for the right offer. And the offer could be you. It doesn't have to be like a product or anything. It could be you. It could be you selling them on whatever it is that you want, a job, them to pay you, whatever it may be. So I'm talking to these agents. Now, some of these agents are pretty big deals. I'm calling 50 agents a day and they're all telling me, get the fuck off the phone. Like, this idea is never going to work. If it could have been done, it would have been done. They're like, I have more work experience in the agent world and we've never done this than you have in your life. Like, I have 25 years of work experience. You don't even have 25 years of life. And I'm like, oh my God. I'm not getting crushed, but I'm also realizing all I need is one, you know, that underdog mentality is like, let's go. I'm going to make this work. Yeah. Right. And I keep going. And finally I get one agent and I'm getting creative in everything that I can do. I get one agent to commit a guy. Now I start dancing between all these teams and the players and the media, and I start connecting dots. And by the time the event came, we filled it up with 23 out of our 24 roster spots. Someone ended up bailing on the last minute for us. We have 23 guys in that first year. And we have over half the NBA in attendance. We have a bunch of the media. And the first year goes off without a hitch. We end up having almost half of those guys get major contracts on what's called a two-way contract, which is like a 10x salary versus the regular G League. We have other guys go abroad, but all 23 guys got jobs following our event. And it was like, all right, it was proven. And then we kept building it over the last couple of years.
That is unbelievable, man. And you're sensational, just action again, right? Yeah. Like, not many people go, I got to put a deposit down on this thing, try to make all these phone calls. It's like, just almost the mentality of just like, screw it. Like, let me do it. Let me try it. Let me just be ferocious in my activity. And if it works out, great. And if it doesn't work out, great. But it's like, I think a lot of the times what happens in life is if we do take that mentality of let me take all out action, let me just go for it and really commit, a lot of the time it really does work out. And like, you've proven that, and freaking kudos to you, man. That is amazing.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. But let me say this too, because I feel that sometimes when I talk about this and I kind of share this journey, people are like, okay, well, you just have this, you just know that it's going to work out, or you just do it. Like, people are like, Jake, like, you just know it's going to work. But I have the same doubts that every person has when they're trying something that they're trying something new. Yeah. When I wrote my book, right before I launched, 3 weeks before, I'm like, Dad, what if nobody buys this except for you and Mom? What if I release this book? I spend all this time creating it and nobody likes it. What if people tell me I'm not going to buy it from you because you don't have any work experience except for 1 year? Like, you're not credible. What if I get criticized? What if all these things happen? Do I even bother putting this out there? Or was it fun just to say, like, I kind of got close? And my dad literally looks at me and he goes, and he tells me something. And this is one of the big things that I've used every time I have doubts. And he goes, Jake, do you want to sell a lot of copies of this book? I said, yeah. He said, good. He said, do you want to be rich eventually? I said, yeah. He said, do you want to be famous? I'm like, yeah, I'll take some fame. Sure. He goes, do you want to be successful? I said, yeah. He said, do you want to have a beautiful wife and a family someday? I'm like, yeah. He's like, do you want a great house? I'm like, yeah. He's like, yeah. So does everybody else. Everybody wants these things, but guess what? There is no shortcut to making these things happen. And I'm like, okay, Dad, like, speak the truth, my man, like, preach.
Yeah.
And then he says, there is one shortcut. He says, the only shortcut in life is to start now. And when he told me that, I was like, let's go. Because he started to explain, he goes, we all want the things. We all want everything. We all desire all these amazing things. But until we do something about it, nothing's going to change. And he goes, this book may sell 5 copies or 5 million. But I promise you that when you take action today and put yourself out there, great and unexpected things are going to come your way. You can't predict what those things are, but I promise you something's going to happen. And I'm like, okay, Dad, I'm getting ready for the combine. I'm a month before. I'm panicking. What if nobody shows up? What if we don't fill our rosters? What if we get banned? What if the teams don't come? What happens? Like, am I a failure? Like, what if it doesn't work and I just lose all credibility before I even started my basketball career in the agency world, working with agencies? Like, who's going to hire me then? And I thought about it. Well, I'm like, well, I'd rather live a life of oh wells than what ifs. I'd rather say I tried and it didn't work out than say, well, what if I did? And that is what we got to do, is like, we're going to have doubts. Whenever we're doing something out of our comfort zone or trying something new or trying to find a new direction, we're going to have doubts because of the uncertainty. Yeah. It's inevitable. But it's, what are we going to say to ourselves in response to that? Are we going to allow that fear, that doubt, that negativity consume us? Or are we going to say, let's freaking go? This is an opportunity. And guess what? If it doesn't work out, there's going to be something better because I'm going to be more skilled because I tried this thing. Every book that I write gets better. It just does. Yeah. It's not because I just take all these writing classes. It's just when you do something, you get better at it.
Yeah.
Every time. You watch Kobe Bryant. Why was he so good? He practiced the fundamentals over and over and over again.
Yeah.
But a lot of times we get bored at the basics. Why do entrepreneurs not succeed? Because they give up before. They don't do the right things. They don't focus on the basics. And so I think, like, while I'm always going to be this ambitious and taking action person, I think that understanding and realizing how to overcome these doubts and limiting beliefs allows you to be able to take more consistent action, which then allows you to remove that part so that you can really focus on the direction you want to be in.
Let's go, man. You're firing me up over here, Jake. You're speaking to my soul, brother. I love it. So speaking of your writing and your book, your first book that you pulled out that just crushed it and has impacted so many lives, became a bestseller. I know you got a new book that has just come out. So tell us about what's the new book about and all of that. Fill us in. I would love to hear a little bit more about it.
Dude, man, thanks so much. I'm so excited about this book. This is my third one. It's called The Elevated Entrepreneur. And it's all about unlocking the secrets of the world's greatest performers, coaches, and entrepreneurs. So I looked at my network. I looked at people that I wanted to get to know, and I was like, I need to find some of the best in the world. So I've interviewed over 39 people, and I've asked them a bunch of different questions on what they've done to be super successful in their own way. I've asked questions like, how have relationships helped achieve your success? What is success? How do you enjoy the journey in the pursuit of greatness, right? What is the best action that you can do so you can achieve monumental success? I've asked all these different questions, put it all in this book. And then I did analysis and commentary to really help people become high performing, productivity crushing, and freedom achieving entrepreneurs. So I'm just like juiced up about this. We got some guests that, like Anthony Trucks is in the book. We got Pat Flynn, John Lee Dumas, Lori Harder. We have the governor of Nevada in the book. We have all these amazing performers and entrepreneurs who are all about like, let's level up. Let's get to that next level for whatever you define success as. And so, dude, like, I'm just fired up about this. The response has been unbelievable so far. And like, just to be able to talk about it just brings me so much joy because I know how impactful it's going to be as it spreads all over the world.
Hell yeah, man. And I'm excited. I'm just getting my copy now. So I appreciate it, man. I appreciate you sharing with everybody. And we'll have the links for all that in the show notes. But if you want to share with people, like, for anyone that's listening to this and they're going like, holy crap, Jake's got some fire. I want some more of that. Where can they get more info on you? Where can they find the book? Fill us in.
Yeah. So the best place to get info on me is on Instagram at Jake Kelfer. That's where I'm living. I'm spending time. Let's engage. Let's chat. And then to get a copy of the book, what we did for this book is we made this book free. So you could buy it on Amazon, but we made it free. And all you got to do is cover the shipping. I wanted to get this book in as many hands as possible. Yeah. So if you go to theelevatedentrepreneur.co, you can just go on there, grab a free copy, just pay the shipping fee, and you're good to go. And we'll ship it to you right to your door, and you don't have to worry about anything else. But we wanted to get into as many hands as we possibly could. So we made it that way, and it's theelevatedentrepreneur.co.
Heck yeah, man. And we'll put, again, all that in the show notes. So definitely everybody go grab your copy. And one last question I have for you, Jake. The show, we're all about helping people find direction, but we want to do it through action. And clearly, you are the action man. I'm just going to say it. And so I'm curious for you, like, what would you say is one thing someone listening to this can do in the next 24 to 48 hours to start finding direction in their life?
Buy my book. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just teasing. I'm just teasing. You got listeners like me like, did you really just say that? No, look, the number one thing that we got to do here, all right, is you have to get clear on what success means to you. Sit down with your thoughts, 15 minutes, and just say, when I think of success, what does it mean to me? Financial success, what does that look like? Put an actual number on it. See what it actually costs to live your dream lifestyle. Career success, how do I want to spend my time? Do I want to work for someone else? Do I want to work with myself? Relationship success with. Is my personal relationships dialed in? My romantic dialed in? Is it where I want them to be? My professional relationships, my health success, emotional success, fitness success, charitable success. Ask yourself, what does success actually mean to you? Because sometimes the best thing we can do is sit with our thoughts and figure out what success means so that then we can actually start the right action steps.
Right.
And once you know and you get clear on what success means to you after those 15 minutes, well, you can start pushing the pedal to the metal and start making things happen.
Let's go. Heck yeah, Jake. Well, my man, thank you again so much for being on the show, man. It's been an absolute honor. I'm about to go do some crazy stuff after this. You just got me freaking fired up, man. And everybody, I would suggest go listen to this episode 2, 3, 4, 5 times. Send it to somebody you know that needs a little bit of fire in their life, needs to take some action. Jake, thank you so much for being here, man, and massively appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you.